Hi, hi. First off, I want to thank Tilting Axis and Curando Caribe for inviting me to come and present this pop-up. It's kind of funny actually because I usually work behind the scenes, so I'm usually where Holly is right now, on the mattress, on my computer, making updates to the website. But with that though, I do want to give a thanks to the team behind all of this, because I know behind the scenes there's a lot going on, and the translators have been very awesome to have for this iteration. So on that note, I would like to start. So my presentation here, we have a few technical difficulties with the slides, but I will try to play along. No, I can't. So my presentation begins here in the yard in Trinidad. To help situate the space and context, I'd like to share this video of Yard co-founder, artist Christopher Cozier, discussing some of his recent work. Thank you. Because what's a tilting axis without Christopher Cozier?
We often use the big, long, canonical history of Euro-American art to denigrate. We often use the big, long, canonical history of Euro-American art to denigrate contemporary practice. What we don't realize is the artists in those environments are trying to break out of those dictates. And where do they go to try and break down those dictates? Those restrictions on their practice, their ideas, and their way of working. They come to us. They come to places like the Caribbean and Africa and South America and so on, you know? My studio isn't necessarily somewhere that I lock off from the world around me. I grew up around Spain, you know, we moved out to the suburbs. I mean, like, look at this. This is just like, nothing like these bricks tell you where you are. A lot of my ideas come from taking walks. They obviously were doing some kind of renovation to that building to put an electric gate, and suddenly the headstone was no longer needed. They knock it off and throw it on the ground. Every day I'd walk at it and say, I want to do something with this headstone, but I didn't know what. So I said, okay, let's try to move it. And then, you know, one idea led to the next. Well, it failed, but I think a lot of my ideas come from trying to do things that don't necessarily work. Why do I want to move a headstone? I don't know, but it opens an idea about history, about the value of the space we live in, about the predicament of our lives. The contemporary is based on a kind of vernacular practices, the things that we do anyhow, and to find ways to validate them. And I think one of the things about Trinidad society is that we don't understand that the artistic process is like something that happens in a laboratory. You know, you're searching for ideas, and we don't seem to value that. We always value the aftermath. I'm sort of tired of that passive, you know, making nice things to hang on walls for people to come and smile and say it's nice and buy. I'm at the stage in my life now where even though I've made a certain amount of work and I like making things, I'm actually sort of bored. And I think a lot of creativity comes from boredom. That's the way that I have found myself, you know, because I went to art school like anybody else. I learned to paint. I love painting. I think it's lovely. But I'm interested in other things. You know, I'm interested in a kind of an experiment.
Oh, Chris. So for all of you who don't know, I talked to a lot of people these past few days, and I think most of you guys do know Alice Yard, which is nice to kind of walk into. For those who may not know about Alice Yacht is an informal art space. It's the backyard of architect Sean Leonard. It was started 10 years ago with Sean, Chris, and then one more person, Nicholas Lachlan, who is a writer for a magazine called Caribbean Beat, and he's also one of the coordinators for the Bocas Festival that you guys heard about earlier today. So my presentation today is about one of my projects in the yard called Tough Prints. For me, the yard has been the place that has provided everything I want in terms of energy and in terms of inspiration. Last year, my colleague Sean Leonard spoke here at the Tilting Axis about Alice Yard, the home of my poster project. A large part of this project for me and why this project matters really has to do with the concept of the yard space and its relationship to art and community and culture. The ethos of the Tough Prints project reflects that of the yard, what the yard co-founder Sean Leonard, an architect, would call investments. These are investments in sharing or generosity, relationships, collaboration, and play. It was in Alice Yard that the notion of play resonated with me in terms of a proper creative process for me as a graphic designer, which had to do with the restrictions and conversations around human-centered ideas, resources, and negotiation of space. Sean talks about an open-endedness that is associated with play. This I find critical, given the usual constraints that most of us here at Tilting Axis are familiar with living and working in the Caribbean. A couple of years ago, I began curating this wall, which was a side project. It was a very ordinary wall in a semi-public yard space. Semi because the yard is residential, and public because it remains open every day. What's nice about this project is that anybody can submit work to show on the wall at any time, and just about anybody can view it. The artwork so far has come from the following countries. Oops. From Venezuela, from the Netherlands, sorry, going back. Okay, I have to describe the process a little bit. So essentially how this works, and I think why I was invited to come to give this talk was that it's the process that's interesting. It's a very simple project. It's just a wall, posters that we put up on the wall. But I think the accessibility to it has allowed for a lot of qualities that the yard represents. So the website is up, so that's accessible to everybody. And on the website, you have instructions and guidelines as to how to enter into the project. So we have the website on the top left. And then once I receive the PDF, so everything is received as a digital PDF. So I have that, and the power of technology to now archive that. So I set up the files. I head over to the local print shop, which is really right next door to Alice Yard. And then from there, I trim it down, I put it up on the wall, and then I document it. So I take photos of the wall, the posters, and then I put it on Facebook and Instagram, and the work gets archived on the cloud. So the artwork so far has come from the following countries: from Venezuela, the Netherlands, USA, UK, St. Vincent, Cayman Islands, the Bahamas, Italy, Trinidad, Tobago, and others. Since May 2016, 33 works have been featured. Each one is printed in black and white on cheap bond paper. Each print usually costs me about $20 US. The work is trimmed down to size, as I said, and then wheat pasted on the wall in the yard. The wheat paste is a mixture of flour, water, and Trinidad rum. The rum helps keep the mold from growing on the posters, especially during the rainy season. Afterwards, each artwork is photographed and posted on Instagram and Facebook and backed up on the cloud. Hashtags are included, and links to the websites and portfolios of each artist and designer are added. The whole process, or action as we call it in the yard, takes about 45 minutes. This is my investment. So not all the work gets submitted or gets pasted. Consideration is given to the fact that the yard remains a public space and open to all who might view the project, from the person who cleans the yard to the Moko Jumbies or the silt walkers who pass through the yard, from musicians to art residents to primary school students. Usually I average about 2 posters per month. So far there's been work by Caribbean contemporaries like Henriquez, who I think is in the audience or was here, Blue Curry, Christopher Cozier, and as well as emerging Caribbean artists like Simon Tatum, which I think his poster actually got, I think, sent in after the Tilting Axis last year. He's from the Cayman Islands. And Kelly Lindo, who's from Jamaica. We have sign painters and writers as well who've shown work, all sharing a single concrete space on a wall in a yard in Woodbrook, Port of Spain, in Trinidad, in the Caribbean. So the image here, no, that's it back. Yeah. So the Tough Prints parent project, Ficciones Typográfica, is in Minnesota, USA, and is managed by another graphic designer whose name is Eric Brandt. He uses the wall outside his home garage. There's sister projects in France and Germany. One's on the street. The other is a shop front door. Since starting the project, another Tough Prints site was added in September 2016. This one faces a busy street in a nearby historic neighborhood called Belmont in Trinidad, and makes use of old plexiglass, which used to be a stand-in for a window at an old printery. More recently, there was an indoor exhibition showcasing all of the Tough Prints to date in Auckland, New Zealand, by the curator and fellow Tilting Axis colleague Remco de Blijch. Caribbean art spaces Beta Locale and Teoretica also participated in this space. So it's 33 posters, and then 33 postcards were delivered. The remote exhibition was an unusual experience for me. This included an Instagram residency where we could curate the institution's social media feed for a week from here at home in the Caribbean. What struck me more than anything else was the question, how you go from this to this to this. All right. The notion of scale and compression, the notion of geography and technology. I go back to the yard idea of open-endedness. The concept of wheat-pasted posters is not something new. Tough Prints leverages the visual culture of wheat-pasted posters and all of its efficiencies, materials, costs, accessibility, to create an unexpected community. The open-ended nature of this project makes it a little bit different. Yesterday, wall space, today an exhibition, tomorrow probably a publication, but still a wall space in the yard, connected online. So I recently came across this. So for those who know the work of artist Theaster Gates, this is one of his 9 principles of ethical redevelopment, which I find very suiting to the project that I'm working on. This comes from a think tank that he has developed over in Chicago, and it reads, and I'd like you guys to read along. It's an investment in yourself, in your ideas and projects, sends a signal to those watching your work. It is critical to have skin in the game, to make something at stake, even if the investment is sweat equity. Making change requires conviction and commitment, utilizing belief, brain power, energy, time, and dogged perseverance. Projects like these require belief and motivation more than they require funding. Whether intervention is a single project, location, or gesture, it has impact and reverberation. Early small success can enable the next project. Leverage the attention garnered by the work to amplify it. Let the work attract more believers. A good idea is as crucial as establishing relationships with funders, gaining access to multiple spheres of influence, and incorporating expertise. Turn interest and excitement into investment. Resource streams should be diverse, stacked and bundled to meet the price tags of your project. Over time, a project from your initial days of engagement and experimentation can mature. Something that you passionately believed in but had little external backing for can grow in scale and scope to become a sophisticated version that many stakeholders support and believe in. Demonstrating capacity permits access to greater resources. And this is something I think is very important. Proof of infrastructure is persuasive. So the ability to prove to others that you can do this allows for greater scalability. Gates has been instrumental in using artistic practice to reinvigorate blighted areas in Chicago's urban centers in the US. This description articulates what I think underlies an open-ended approach, which I think gets lost in translation as something more abstract than it really is. So Alice Yard is a living, breathing space for ideas. One thing that has helped me is what Gates describes. It's an investment in yourself, in your ideas and projects, which sends a signal to those watching your work. It is critical to have skin in the game. Demonstrating capacity permits access to greater resources. Proof of infrastructure is persuasive. So my latest project and some of you might be familiar with this building, is Tuff Press. So it's an extension of the Tuff Prints project. It's located in Alice Yard's sister space called Grandison Lab, where one of the Tuff Prints on the corner, bottom corner there resides, as we talked about earlier. So Tuff Press is a risograph print and design workshop where they focus on image making and zines for arts and culture. I won't get into too much detail about it since it's really still in very early stages. My background is in publishing and book covers. This building used to be an old printery, so it's kind of fitting and poetic to come back to a space where I can now make printed material, printed matter. So much of the thinking behind Tuff Prints in the yard extends to the press. This layer of older technology to produce and share work, to invest in relationships, to create collaborations and more play. I look forward to the future conversations with Amy and Jorge from Curando Caribe, with Hacemos Cosas, La Impresora from Beta Local, and others. I welcome you to come play, and I'll end with something I often hear in the yard. Let's see what happens.